Hi, fifth graders. We are here today for our third reading lesson on fantasy book clubs, and today we're going to be talking about keeping track of multiple problems. So, have you ever had a problem that you set out to solve, but it just keeps getting worse? I know that I have. When I think about this question, I think about when I was little and my parents were painting my brother's bedroom, and I went in there when they had left the room for a minute and they had an open paint can on the floor. I ended up tripping over the paint can and spilling it on the ground, all over the carpet. And so there I had a really big problem and I didn't want to tell him. And so I ran out of the room and I went and got some towels and I tried to clean up the paint, but it ended up just smearing the paint more into the carpet. So I tried to solve the problem again by just taking my brother's nightstand and moving it over top of the paint, hoping that my parents would never know that I had spilled paint all over the carpet. They ended up finding out in the end, of course, and they were a little upset that I wasn't honest about it in the beginning. And so there's an example of I had my main problem of spilling the paint, but then as I tried to solve it, it just kind of kept getting worse and worse. We also see an example of this in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, which is the first book. And if you've read this book before, you know that at the end of the book, Harry Potter finds the Sorcerer's Stone, which he's been looking for throughout the entire novel. But when he does that, he actually releases the evil spirit of Voldemort, which causes some problems in the rest of the books. And so there he was trying to solve a problem, but then he just kind of made it worse. So today what we're going to be talking about is that in your fantasy novels, like I've said before, they are really complex. And one thing that we need to do as good fantasy readers is keep track of all the multiple problems that are going on using graphic organizers and charts. And that way, that will allow us for close analysis so we can really look at those problems. So an example of this would be right now during this time where we are teaching and learning from home, I actually decided to reread the Hunger Games series. And I did that because I heard that Lucas was rereading it and Trevick wanted to, and so I naturally wanted to as well. So thanks, guys, for that suggestion. But I reread the first novel, and as I was reading it, I was so excited about it. It had been a long time since I had read that book. And I had forgotten that there were so many problems and plot lines and quests, and it was just really complicated and a lot of fun to read, though. But I sat down and I was trying to explain all that was going on and all of these problems and all these plot lines and all of the quests to my husband, who has never read the books before. And he was just looking at me like I was crazy. He could not keep track of it. So I needed to think of a way to keep track of all of those problems and all those plot lines and all the different quests of the different characters that I was reading about. So I'll show you guys the chart, and it's kind of a graphic organizer that I created to help me keep track of all these different problems. And you'll notice on this graphic organizer that I have a column for who the character is. And so a lot of times in fantasy novels, we'll have not just the main character, which in this case in Hunger Games is Katniss, but we'll have the other characters actually on their own quests and their own problems, trying to solve their own problems as well. And so I created this to kind of show two different characters, but you could definitely extend this to as many characters as you see are on their own quest and that are solving problems. So the first one here I'll kind of walk you through is the character is Katniss, who is the main character. And the very first problem that she comes across in the novel is that her sister Prim's name is called during the reaping ceremony. And I know a lot of you haven't read the book, but basically what that means is her sister's name is called and her sister is going to have to go into this game called the Hunger Games, where they have to fight each other. And it's a really horrible game. And Katniss doesn't want her sister to have to go through that. So she actually volunteers as tribute, meaning that she volunteers to go into the games instead of her little sister. Then the next problem that Katniss faces is that she is in the Hunger Games and she is in these woods, and she has no water. So here I wrote for the solution or the change is that after 2 days, she finds water and decides to stay there. But then at night, when she is about to go to sleep, a fire drives her out of the area. So there she was trying to solve the problem of not having water. She finds water, but then she's driven out of the area, meaning that she's kind of kicked out because there's this giant fire that chases her out of there. So the problem kind of gets worse there. So I'll take a pause here and just notice this column says solution or change. It doesn't necessarily, it's not always a solution. Sometimes the problem gets worse, or maybe the problem just kind of changes a little bit, like we saw here. So that when Katniss, the main character, is trying to find water, she finds it, but then she can't stay there, and the fire drives her out of the area. So now she's without water again. Okay, it keeps going on, and I recorded some more problems here. That you can take a minute and go back and reread over if you need a little bit more, if you need some more examples of problems and then how they get worse or how they change. You can read those in this column, the solution and change here. Okay. I also recorded down another character. His name is Peta, and he's another main character. He has his own problems and his own quests, and so it's important for me to keep track of those so I can analyze those and be able to talk in my book club about those. So keeping track of these problems and the different quests that your characters are on is going to be particularly important for your book club discussions. And so this is one of the things we're going to be talking about in book club meetings next week. In your homework bags for this week, you will actually find a blank graphic organizer like the one that I used on the previous slide. And it's a blank one, so you can go ahead and fill it out for your characters and the problems that they face, and you can try it out. Or if you have a different graphic organizer in mind that is going to make sense to you on keeping track of those problems, you can go ahead and try that out and use that. In your homework bags this week, I also included your reading journals. And so just like we've done in class, you guys can take those reading journals and just have those sitting next to you as you read your books, and keep those notes and things to bring to your book club to discuss at your next book club meeting. All right, so remember to keep track of those problems, try out that graphic organizer, and I will talk to you guys soon.
Hi, fifth graders. It's Mrs. McMillan here with your McMillan Math Minute for today. Well, really, it's probably going to be your McMillan 10 minutes. But I want to go ahead and go over with you what we're working on this week. Remember, this is new learning, and so it might be hard right now. However, with a little practice, you will all get it. Here's what I want to show you to start with. This is our target for this week. I can use an area model to multiply fractions. This goes along with the blue pages in your packet that are pages 184 and 185. Let me go ahead and show you what those look like. Mine aren't blue, but they're the same pages. The first one is called Picturing Fraction Multiplication, and the second one is just behind it. It's printed front to back. It's called Modeling Fraction Multiplication. You'll see that there's lots of arrays on there, so that tells you what pages you're going to do. Back to our target, I can use area model to multiply fractions. Families, just so you know, you're going to know the quick way to do this, and our fifth graders will catch on to that quite fast as well. But we're really working on being able to model and understand what it means to multiply a fraction by a fraction. The success criteria for this paper is to draw an array, label the dimensions, shade the area, and then write an equation to match. And your worksheet will walk you through that. We were working on this right before we left for the stay at home. So this is not something that's brand new to any of you. I'm going to give you a couple of reminders that I grabbed out of class. Remember remember we talked about this model where we were showing the sandwiches. We also had the milk jug. We had the double number line. And we also looked at a tile. We're going to be working with this tile area model for multiplying our fractions. So let's get started. Here's the first problem we're going to talk about. 1/4 times 1/3. And I know that when I multiply, it is an array. If I use an area model, that's the same thing for multiplication. So I'm going to go ahead and draw that out. If I start here at 0, and I'm going to draw that linear line to 1. Let's say I'm making a garden. I'm actually making some vegetable gardens in my backyard. And we want to know how big or what area is in my vegetable garden. So let's say maybe we have 1/4 by 1/3 yard. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to look at this denominator here, and it is a 4. And so I know that this needs to be divided into 4 equal parts. So I just did that. Here's 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, and then of course 4/4. That would be one linear dimension. Now, if I look at my other linear dimension, this is a very small vegetable garden. My denominator is 3. So I'm going to take and go the other direction. I'm still going to draw it to 1. That would be like 1 yard. But I know I need it to be divided into 3 equal parts. I have 1/3, and I have 2/3, and then of course 1 whole would be 3/3. Now for this model, I only need to figure out, if I were to look at this whole thing, I am not figuring out the whole area for this whole section. I only need 1/4. So I'm going to draw the amount I need in. Here are my fourths. You can see it's that teal color. And I'm going to go ahead and shade that now. So you can see I have 1/4. 1/4 of my total garden would be that teal. And then I need 1/3 for this other factor. So you can see I just broke it into 1, 2, 3 equal parts. And I'm going to go ahead and shade in one of those 3 parts to show 1/3. I'm using 2 colors on my paper. I've included 2 different colored pencils in your packet this week for this purpose. Sometimes it helps to have those 2 colors to really see what's really happening here. Now we can see that the area that I have shaded, I have 1 part shaded. So I know that's going to be my numerator, 1 part out of 1, 2, 3, 4, and I have 3 groups of those 4. And I know that 4 times 3 is 12. So I have 1 part out of 12 parts. So my total area for my garden is 1/12. Like I said, if that was a real garden, it would be very, very small. I want to show you one more, if you want to go ahead and do this one along with me, go ahead and pause the video and grab a piece of paper to do that. Here is our second problem. 2/3 times 3/4. Again, we could be making another garden. Maybe I thought, Mr. McMillan, I'm not sure a 1/4 by 2/3 garden is going to be very big. Maybe we can make our boxes a little bit bigger and have a few more of them. So again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to start with the 2/3. I'm going to draw a linear model, a linear measurement of 1. This would be 0, and this would be 1, showing me that that would be as if I had the whole. However, I see that I only have 2/3 of that whole linear measurement, so I need to mark that out. Because the denominator is 3, I'm going to break this into 3 equal parts. And again, I labeled those dimensions. That's part of your success criteria, to label the dimensions. Now I'm going to move on to my second number here, 3/4. Again, I'm going to put holes so I can see what the hole would be like. There is my next linear dimension of 1. Knowing that my denominator is 4, I'm going to go ahead and break that into 4 equal parts. We have 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, and 4/4 would be 1 whole. When I go ahead and finish off my area or my array, showing that it makes that rectangle. Now, I don't need that whole rectangle because I am only using 2/3 by 3/4, or 2/3 times 3/4. You can see that I actually only need this space in here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mark off those thirds. And I'm going to shade in the thirds. We know that if we were just looking at the whole array here, right, this would be equal to 2/3 of that array. Now I'm going to go ahead and go on to my next factor, which is 3/4. I'm going to draw in the lines. I just went from this 1/4 across to show that I have 1, 2, 3, 4 equal parts. This time I need 3 of those parts. I'll go ahead and shade in 3/4. That would be 1/4. 2/4 and 3/4. Now you can see that some of these squares have that double colored, like we had the 2/3 and the 3/4. I'm going to go ahead and count those up now. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 parts. I'm going to go ahead and write that as my numerator. My numerator becomes 6. And then I'm going to figure out my denominator. Well, I see that I have 3, 3, 3, and 3. And I know that 4 groups of 3 is 12. And I could count that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 is our denominator. So I have 6 12ths. So I'm going to write that up here. 5th graders, one thing I want you to start looking at is, where do I get this 6? How is this 6 related to those numerators? And how is the 12 related to the denominators? Showing the picture. Let me review one more time our target and what our success criteria is for this assignment. I can use an area model to multiply fractions. We're using pages 184 and 185. It's front to back in that blue section. Your success criteria is to draw an array, label the dimensions, shade the array, and write an equation to match. Remember, it's going to take practice, and you guys can do this. If you have any questions at all, please reach out to myself or Mrs. Leibel, and we would be happy to go over with that. It would be great if you had these pages done or attempted during your book club meeting, because I'll come on and I'll meet with you and we'll do some more practicing around these. I miss you, and I hope you're having a great day. Thanks.